Welcome to Criminal Appeal, the true crime podcast with expert perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Casey Jordan. As a criminologist, I've investigated mass murderers and human traffickers, assassins and stalkers, serial and spree killers, wife beaters, and wives with knives. I've analyzed crimes and court cases for commentators like Anderson Cooper, Ashley Banfield, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Nancy Grace, and Piers Morgan. Now, I'm revealing my insider's perspective on criminal cases that I've worked, just for you. This episode may contain sensitive material, including interviews with individuals involved in crimes, depictions of violence, and explicit language. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Appeal, the true crime podcast that's different than other true crime podcasts because I, your host, Dr. Casey Jordan, and my co-host,
Dr. Colleen Butler-Sweet.
We tackle cases that I know personally. I've worked them in real time as a criminologist, investigative profiler, attorney, sometimes victim advocate, or in this, our season 3, cases that I have covered in real time as they broke, in this case, over years, through the media, analyzed for the media from either a criminologist or attorney perspective. Before we dig into this particular case, we do need to remind you to please subscribe. It really, really matters. It helps us so much. Click the little subscription button. Be sure to like. We love it when you comment, and we try to reply to your comments. And be sure to share it with your friends if you are enjoying Criminal Appeal Podcast. If you want to keep listening to more episodes, you got to tell your friends, because that's the only way we're going to get the numbers that will sustain this podcast. It's true, right, Colleen?
Absolutely. And in terms of the comments, you and I typically will respond. We read them and we definitely respond, especially when you ask us questions. We love that. Mm-hmm. But also, people are coming up to me really often now saying, oh my gosh, I love your podcast. And I'm like, so please subscribe.
Doesn't cost a thing.
Exactly. That is how we reach more people. That's how the algorithm will send us out to more people and stick around and bring you more great stories.
And we do want to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, Ventura Law, the accident law firm. Listen, I know them. They're not just a sponsor. They're my friends over there in the law office. And we'll hear from them midway through this episode. But the bottom line is they've been here in Danbury, Connecticut area for more than 65 years. If you have been injured in an accident or a loved one, even a wrongful death, an assault, a sexual assault, even a rideshare assault, they will take care of it for you. You call their number. You're going to hear it at the mid-range point of our episode. And I just want to give a personal shout out. I sent a friend of mine who just got hit by a drunk driver to Ventura Law, and immediately they are taking over, letting him heal, taking all the stress out of everything that happens moving forward. So thanks to Ventura Law. Now, kind of blanket sensitivity alert. The case we're about to cover is one of the darkest serial killers in the annals of true crime. And we are going to just tell you that the things he did to human beings are unspeakable, but I will be giving you probably 3 or 4 of the vignettes of his victims, and what he did to these people is extremely disturbing. So when I start telling you the facts of a case of one of his many of dozens of horrible rapes and murders, you may want to turn it down if you've got kids in the car, or listen to it a different time. So, Colleen, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Let me set the stage for the terror that our next subject reigned on his victims for more than 12 years. And it's a name that you're going to recognize, perhaps more for the method by which he was captured and the book that was written about him. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the case of the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo. Mm-hmm. Now, again, to set the stage, let me tell you about one of his very first victims, dating all the way back to October 5th, 1976. Jane Carson and her husband, they were leaving for work around 6:30 in the morning. Jane was still in bed with their 3-year-old son, and her husband had just taken off. She hears the garage door close, and minutes later, she hears somebody running down the hall to her bedroom. She's thinking maybe it's her husband who came back for something, but all of a sudden there's a man standing above her in a ski mask, 6:30 in the morning, and he has a large butcher knife in his hand, and he's standing over her while she's in bed with her 3-year-old son. This man tells her, "All I want is your money." And then he blindfolds and he gags Jane and her little boy. She can hear him ripping up fabric, and even after she's already tied up, he's still ripping things, which doesn't make sense. He moves her little boy off the bed, and she is unsure what happens to her child because she is bound and gagged and tied to the bed. Now, when he unties her ankles, she realizes this isn't a robbery. After the rape, he acts like he has all the time in the world. No rush. He goes into the kitchen and he starts rummaging around through all the pots and pans. She hears him cooking something. And then he comes back to make sure Jane has not moved, telling her that he will kill her if she does. After an hour, he brings Jane's son back to the bed and leaves. Her child's unharmed. She removes her gag and her blindfold, and she hobbles outside to scream for help, and then a neighbor calls the police. Now, this is just one attack that would launch more than a decade of predatory break-ins, constant violence, escalating violence. It ends up resulting in at least 50 forcible rapes and 13 murders.
In 1976, I was 30 years old. I was happily married, had a 3-year-old son.
Early morning, 6:30 a.m., Jane is home with her son. Her husband had just left for work.
My little 3-year-old had just climbed in bed with me for a nice snuggle.
Minutes later, she hears somebody running down the hall towards her bedroom.
Next thing she knows, she's looking at a masked man. And he's shining the flashlight.
Holding a big knife.
She can hear him ripping up fabric even after she's been gagged and blindfolded.
I'm thinking, oh my God, is he gonna hang us? That was so scary.
This man ends up taking her son away from her.
Then he untied my ankles, and then I knew what he was there for. After that, he kept going from the bedroom, telling us that if we moved, he would kill us. And then he'd go back in the kitchen.
He would actually stay in the house for hours.
Not only does he possess the victims, he possesses their belongings, he possesses their house.
And eventually, her son was placed back into bed next to her.
After we thought he was gone, I was able to take my mask down.
We had 5 cases that all had the same method of operation. Always confronting the victims in bed, shining a flashlight in their eyes. He had a ski mask on. He always had a weapon.
He would turn the TV on and put the towel over it. I believe in part he's doing that so he can see the woman, but he could also see the terror in her face.
It's a psychological torture.
We've got a serial rapist, and this is a bad guy.
He was the boogeyman of the community. He was like a ghost.
Now, this is one of the oldest and most notorious of all of the cold cases that we study in criminology, and was only solved because of developments in familial DNA, which was not available in the early 70s when these crimes started, and which has now resulted, Colleen, in more than 1,600 cases being solved. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. More and more cases are being cleared by familial DNA all the time, including ones that you're also familiar with, BTK, and even how they linked the Idaho student slayer Brian Kohberger to the crime scene. So, Colleen, I don't know. You know a lot about. You're kind of a serial killer junkie of sorts. So, talk about the other killers that were going on in California at the time.
Yeah, I think that, when we think about California serial killers, our minds typically go to Zodiac in Northern California or Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, in Southern California. What's so interesting, though, about the Golden State Killer is he had more victims than Zodiac and Night Stalker combined.
Wow.
And he terrorized the entire state. That's one of the main factors.
From north to south.
From north to south, right? He'd be in the Sacramento area, but then he would be down.
That makes it so hard
California.
So hard to catch.
Exactly.
He didn't stay just in one community. He was all over.
All over. Now, some of you might be familiar with the Golden State Killer because of Michelle McNamara's phenomenal book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer, which is actually going to be our July Criminal Appeal Book Club pick. It's a classic.
Yeah.
So many have read it, but I still think it's worth it for us to unpack it as part of our book club.
Absolutely. If you haven't read it, why not? And even if you're like, oh no, I don't like nonfiction, I don't like the true crime stuff, I like novels, it reads like a novel.
She is a phenomenal storyteller.
Beautiful narrative. So we really recommend that you read it. You will learn, this case is so huge with so many victims and so many crimes that there's no way we can cover it in this episode. But if you just want to get the book, it will fill in all the gaps. Ready to go?
I absolutely am. Just one last note on the book. I try to pick books that criminologists and professionals love. And it's not just you and I, the faculty and my entire department, criminology faculty. Everybody really, really thinks it's one of the best out there.
And I require it. It's required reading in my seminar on violent crime class. So you will learn a lot from it. Okay, recap.
So when talking about Golden State Killer, he is killing throughout California. And then the assaults, the sexual assaults and the burglaries between 1974 and 1986. But he's not caught until 2018, which means this case was cold for 34 years.
And if it weren't for familial DNA, it might
Never
still
would've.
be cold.
What's also interesting about the Golden State Killer, he's essentially three criminals in one.
Yeah.
Between the years of 1974 and 1976, both Northern and Southern California, as we say, are terrorized by systematic burglaries.
Yeah.
That's the first phase of his criminal behavior.
He's going to evolve.
Right? Then he escalates to rapes, the second phase, and then finally murder. And while the series of crimes initially appeared to be unrelated due to the geographic distance, it's up in Sacramento, it's down in Southern California, it's in
This is the
Visal.
70s. The cops down in Southern California aren't speaking to the cops in Northern California. I mean, we did not have the massive databases and clearinghouses for crimes that exist today.
And digital communications that make it so easy. So for a very long time, police had not connected
the dots,
The dots, exactly. So the first stage in his evolution into eventually becoming a serial killer is when he's the Visalia ransacker. This is 1974 to 1975. Visalia ransacker. So Visalia's Central Valley. So we're going to be in between San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Got it.
Essentially. Okay, so the first recorded ransacking occurred on March 19th, 1974. When a sum of just $50, granted it's the 70s, but still $50.
A lot of money back then.
In coins was stolen from a piggy bank. Most of the ransacker's activities involve breaking into houses, rifling through or vandalizing the owner's possessions, scattering women's underclothes, stealing a range of low-value items, but personal items to the victims, like earrings, cufflinks, etc., while often ignoring higher valued items right in plain sight. The ransacker would also often arrange or display items in the house. Casey, what is going on in his mind?
I am listening, I am processing it, and I've got to tell you that I see a few different things. First and foremost, psychological intimidation.
Okay.
And control. Now, unlike typical burglars who steal for financial gain, I mean, they want the money. Who wants to carry $50 in coins? It's not about the money. His ransacking is a form of psychological warfare, Colleen. He's going to tear through the house. He's going to strew those female undergarments across the beds where everyone can see them. He's going to disturb the personal belongings. And I'm going to tell you, just quick sidebar, that I've had burglaries at my house, and just when you open your drawers and see that they went through it, even if they didn't take your underwear, it's all messed up, and you're like, he touched it. You want to go wash it, right? So the goal was to violate the victim's sense of safety, and it worked. because it would prove to them and himself that their most private spaces were entirely at his mercy. Now, the second thing that's going to ping for me is clear to, I think, our viewers too, sadistic fantasy and sexual deviance. So for D'Angelo, the chaos that he was creating in the victim's home was deeply tied to his own personal sexual arousal. Now, a lot of forensic psychologists would probably agree with me that his behavior it's exhibiting a lot of sadistic tendencies. It's all about the sadism with him. And it's physical, emotional, and psychological. So by going through women's closets and disturbing their intimate apparel, he's indulging in deviant, paraphilic fantasies, like probably really enjoys their underwear, that would later escalate into even more severe forms of sexual assault. Everything's happening in stages. First we touch the underwear, then we throw it around, then maybe he's rubbing himself with it. He definitely has paraphilias, and it's a form of psychological sadism that's actually going to evolve even greater. He would take these things as trophies. Not just the underwear, though. During the invasions, D'Angelo would frequently take these small, worthless items. Yeah. Like what? Why? Loose change, a single earring, a driver's license, photographs of the teenage girls. Now that's creepy because he wants to look at them later. These served as trophies that allowed him to relive his crimes long after he lived the scene. He could play with them. He could touch them. Additionally, the stealing personal items as well as documents. Remember, driver's license could be like, I know who you are.
Yeah.
Not just the photo on the license, but I have your name and address. Don't you forget it. Oh. The stealing of personal items and documents would be ways of gathering information about his victim, kind of logging it so he could remember who they were and where they lived. And he could use this later during his assaults to further disorient and terrify them, or to make sure that he didn't repeat something in the same area. So the next thing that kind of jumps out at me is that all of this is a display of superiority and arrogance. Don't underestimate that. D'Angelo's MO of lingering in the victims' homes. Remember how just a minute ago I gave you the story of Jane and how he, while she is tied up thinking her little baby could be dead, freaked out, just waiting for him to leave, he's taking his time. He's cooking some meal, rattling pots and pans like he lives there. He took the time to eat food from the refrigerators. He drank their beer. He made himself at home like he lived there. This highlights a mindset of extreme entitlement and superiority. And keep in mind, you're going to find this out, he had inside knowledge into how policing worked. So as somebody who'd worked in law enforcement, kind of a spoiler alert, but we're going to get into that, he took immense pride in his ability, not just to break into homes, to stage the scene, but to slip away undetected. The police couldn't catch him. How smart is he? He is smarter than the police. And you're going to understand why he wants to basically get over on the police, be superior to the police, when you find out, it's coming up, that he had been a police officer who was fired. So the act of consuming the food was a blatant display of his perceived power over his victims.
That's so interesting, because who else I think of with sitting in the kitchen making themselves a sandwich is Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker. That's what he did.
Oh, yeah. And Andrew Cunanan did the same thing with his third victim. I mean, we see it sometimes. And it's really, they're trying to get control over a situation, but they're also trying to exhibit that control to their victim because she's in the house. He's like, you can squirm all you want. I'm going to kick my feet up and rest a spell.
Oh boy. Okay. So that is the part of his essential criminal career where he's just doing the burglaries, the Visalia ransacking. Then he escalates to rape, where he is then named the East Area Rapist, sometimes certainly in Michelle McNamara's book called Ear. This is from 1976 to 1979. Now, East Area Rapist crimes are happening up in Sacramento area, Northern California. So you're just a little bit north of San Francisco.
This guy gets around.
Yeah, right. So he's gone from sort of the Mid-Valley up to Central Valley up to Northern California. The East Area Rapist, as he came to be known, his initial modus operandi was to stalk middle-class neighborhoods at night in search of women who were alone in one-story homes, usually near a school, a creek, a trail, or other open space that would provide quick escape. Police believe that the offender, who would conduct extended reconnaissance in the targeted neighborhood, looking into windows and prowling in yards, that always came before the crimes, was his prowling.
Because that's the fantasy part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before selecting a home to attack. He would sometimes even enter the homes of future victims to unlock windows, unload guns, plant ligatures for later use. He frequently, this was a big modus operandi for him, telephoned future victims, sometimes for months in advance, to learn their daily routines. While the East Area rapist initially targeted women alone, he eventually developed a preference for attacking couples.
All right, so he's really evolving. Now, let me give you an example of when that transition happened into attacking couples, because that's really high risk. To break in and attack a defenseless woman with a baby, that's one thing. But to go in there and attack a couple, two people who can, perhaps the man is really aggressive and he's going to overpower you or fight back. But it's interesting. I'll give you the example. A man will stand down if he's afraid that his wife or partner might be killed. And he would use that. So Joanne Miao and her husband, they lived in the city of San Jose. On the morning of December 2nd, 1978, Joanne and her husband were awakened in their bed by a flash beam.
That was his thing, flashlight. Yep.
Flashlight beam, blinding them in their eyes. Imagine waking that up and you open your eyes and the boogeyman is standing above you. So the man was standing at the foot of the bed and he's wearing a ski mask and holding a gun. Whew, sorry, that just reminded me of the boogeyman on the front porch of Nancy Guthrie. But okay, this really is everyone's worst nightmare. He's holding a gun and he says, "Shut up or I'll kill you." And he says, "All I want is food and money." But we know that's not true. He ordered Joanne to tie up her husband, and then he tied Joanne's wrists and her ankles. And they listened as he rummaged through their home, and he kept tearing things. He loved to tear. He's tearing up linen towels. He blindfolds them, and then he gags them. This is where it gets really weird and terrifying. He makes her husband pose in the living room on all fours. And then he piles dishes from the kitchen, plates, china plates, on his back. A whole pile of china plates on his back. And he said, if these fall, if I hear one plate fall, crack, or break, I will kill you. I will kill your wife. I will kill your entire family. Hold still. Remember, he's gagged. He's blindfolded. He's on all fours like a dog. And he has a large pile of china, fragile porcelain on his back. And he has to hold that position and not shake or move or cry while the Golden State Killer, the East Side rapist, is violating his wife.
He has never been caught in a home where there was a man present.
I'll show you. I'll show you who I am.
Joanne Miao and her husband lived in the city of San Jose.
I was a nurse at Stanford Hospital in Palo Alto. I also wanted to start a family.
December 2nd, 1978, you have Joanne and her husband asleep in their bed when a masked man with a gun comes in.
I woke up to a flashlight in my eyes and this guy's yelling, "I have a gun." I screamed at the top of my lungs.
He ordered Joanne to tie up her husband, and then he tied up Joanne by her wrists and her ankles.
He brought that gun to my head. I thought this was gonna be it. And then he got a plate and he put it on the back of my husband.
And he said, "If these plates fall, I will hear it, and I will kill you." He took Joanne into the living room and raped her.
I just kept on saying to myself that you're not gonna get me. You either survive or you don't. I heard the refrigerator open and then him crying.
The victims report that the offender, usually after the sexual assault, would kind of isolate himself, and they'd hear him crying. My mommy's making me do it.
What's going on with this guy?
Clearly, he has some deep-seated issues from childhood that are behind these attacks. Now, in between those sexual assaults, the rapist would roam around and ransack the house. And after a while, Joanne stopped hearing all the noises in her home, and she thought, finally, he's gone. But as soon as she tried to get up, remember, she's blindfolded, she's bound still. As soon as she tried to wriggle and sit up in the bed and stand up, she was shoved back down. He was standing right above her the entire time that she had heard nothing going on in the house. He was just watching her. Lie still or I'll kill you, he would tell her. So more time passed. Joanne's hands and wrists were in excruciating pain from being bound and tied up. But she finally was able to wriggle free and get up. And by this time, he actually was gone. He had taken $70, a 6-pack of Coors beer, her husband's wedding ring. Think about how violating that is. To take his bond of marriage after forcing
violating
him
the wife
and making him listen and not move.
Yep.
Right?
And not do a thing.
And he also took, and this is the weird thing, a GE electric clock. Again.
He did that. Yep.
Oh, and don't forget, he ate a box of Nabisco crackers and left the empty box on the counter because he's a pig. All right. Now, this change in modus operandi is believed to be the direct result of all the media reports claiming that he only attacked women in their home. That's his superiority. Oh, you think I only attack women? You think I just pick on defenseless women? I'll show you what I'm capable of. And police at that point really did believe that his uptick, his change, his increased violence with 2 victims now, and the increased psychological torture was a direct result of media coverage. So his usual method was to break in through a window or a sliding glass door, awaken the sleeping occupants with that flashlight in their faces, and he would always threaten them with a handgun, take control immediately. But let's talk about the stacking of the dishes. I mean, I'm sorry to revisit that, but remember, this is pure sadism. You think sadism is always physical, but it doesn't have to be. If you get pleasure out of inflicting pain, any kind of pain, that's sadism. So he stacks the dishes on the man's back. He threatens to kill his wife, anybody in the house. This is psychological torture, psychological sadism. And then he would move, of course, the woman to the living room, rape her repeatedly, and the husband can hear the entire time what is happening to his wife. I mean, that's agony. I don't know. How do you live with yourself afterwards? You know this isn't your fault, but at the same time, a husband is going to be like, I needed to protect my wife, but if I did, she would have died. I mean, this is, he has to bear listening to the horrific rape of his wife, knowing that if he moves a muscle and one plate falls off his back, everybody dies. So imagine that. I'm sure the husband would have taken a bullet for his wife, but if the dishes fall, she dies. The depth of that psychological and emotional torture shows that for this rapist, it's not about the money. It's also, it is the sex, but it's not all about the sex. This is not just about sexual gratification or getting $70. This is about what he's doing to them psychologically with the torture.
100%. And it's just so, when I think of the dishes stacked on the husband's back, I cannot think of a more emasculating thing.
Yeah.
That you could possibly do to a man at a time, we're talking the 1970s, where, sort of traditional masculinity is anchored in that not just breadwinner, but protector.
Yeah.
And it is just, nothing is more emasculating than that. Another thing that is just coming to mind from McNamara's book, he didn't just like to mess with the minds of the victims. He loved this cat and mouse with the press. Yeah. And what McNamara says in the book is he will whisper in the husband's ear, if I read one word about this in the press, I will come back and kill you. But then he will whisper in the wife's ear, I want to read about this in the press. So it's unreal what he's doing. And then the last piece of psychological torture is this. I don't know why this one stuck with me so much, but he would purposely stay as silent and still as possible until the victim's breath eased. They're like, all right, he's gone. And that's precisely when the nightmare begins again.
Yep.
He's creating this
I think
crescendo.
he's gone. I think he's gone.
All right, he's gone. And
this reminds me of power control-oriented killers who put their thumbs on the throat and strangle until the person's about to die and then take the thumbs off and they think they're going to live. Okay, thank you. I won't tell anybody.
And then right back.
And go right back. But he's doing it psychologically instead of physically.
Yes, toying with them. And of course, what ends up happening is after he does that a few times, she is terrified to move a muscle even after he really is gone, because she doesn't know that he might be right back. So one thing that I thought was interesting that McNamara brings up in the book is she was talking to just anybody she could to try to get a handle on this guy's background. And a few different folks she talked to in the military said, hey, you know, that ability to stay still, totally and completely still and silent.
We teach that in the military.
Is something we learn in the military.
Yeah, wait. Be still, don't move a muscle.
Unbelievable patience, where hours where nothing happens and you can't move a muscle.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting.
For the enemy.
So he is terrorizing Sacramento with 50 rapes in total, and then graduates into murder. That's happening when he moves to Southern California and when in the Santa Barbara County area. And this is where we start to see the crimes of what is named the original Night Stalker. This gets so confusing.
But it's not the Richard Ramirez.
It's not Richard Ramirez Night Stalker. He's predating Richard Ramirez, which is why
him the OG Night Stalker.
Exactly. The original Night Stalker. It's just confusing, especially when so much of what they do is similar. Anyway, the original Night Stalker murders were similar to the East Area rapist crimes in that the perpetrator would rape the female victims, but in Southern California, the rape victims and their male partners, if present, were also brutally murdered. 10 people, 4 couples and 2 individual women, were killed in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange counties between 1979 and 1986. Mm-hmm. Casey, what is happening here? He goes from ransacking to rape.
Yeah.
And now he's killing.
And I remember this, okay? I was in college for most of this. And in 1986, I had started my graduate work at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, starting my PhD program. And I remember hearing about these. But it seemed like officials were absolutely clueless. Now, when we look back now and try to piece it together, from a psychological perspective, there's a lot of theories about why burglars do graduate to become rapists. I mean, were they rapists just kind of getting their nerve up? But then why do rapists actually end up graduating to murder? So let's take a moment. I just need to do this. Sorry, CJ 101. It's time for Casey Jordan to put on her professor hat. In forensic psychology, the Golden State Killer would be best classified as a combination sadistic power rapist. Now, you probably have heard about Nicholas Groth's typologies. We've refined them over the years. But there are 2 different categories, sadistic and power, and then there's power has subsets. But he really is a combo of both because he is so psychologically sadistic. Now, I know when I say sadistic, you're going to think, okay, Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, he was sadistic. The toy box killer, probably the worst sadist of all. Gary Heidnik, a serial killer. They were true physical sadists of what they did to the bodies of their victims. But this guy is doing it all psychologically and emotionally is his sadism. And that is very closely going to be tied to a power assertive rapist. Remember, he's asserting his dominance, flashlight in the face, shouting at them, I'm here for the money, I'm here for the food. Playing cop or cop wannabe. But there's also this element of power reassurance subtype, which is slightly different than the power assertive because the power reassertion person is trying to act with bravado to overcome some deep personal and usually sexual inadequacies that they have in their own life. So they're overcompensating for their deep insecurities. They have deep-seated feelings of sexual inadequacy, right? So the power assertive is really just a facade for the power reassurance rapist. So he's a mashup between sadism and power. Now, I just mentioned the word sexual inadequacies.
Oh boy, yes.
Oh, okay. But you're the one who did. I need to put this all on you.
Oh, great.
I'm putting this all on you, Colleen, because you were like, no, I read something about this. Very often, just real quick, a power reassurance rapist often has some physical malady. Mm-hmm. And it's something that makes them unattractive to women. Could be balding or very receding hairline early in life. Could be, a lot of times we see they have acne. Pock marks, scarring on their faces, a cleft palate, even if it was repaired. They're very subconscious about the scar on their lip. Mm-hmm. In some ways, they think women will never want to have sex with them because of this malady, this physical malady. Sometimes they're short, and sometimes they have a
micropenis. Here we go. Now, so for anybody who has, I think this is probably the most sort of like tabloid famous aspect of the Golden State Killer.
Which is why I made Colleen find the source. I said, we are not mentioning anybody's micropenis until you get this from a reliable source. I'm serious, because we don't want to just like go
or be salacious
and we're not really even making fun of it. I wanted to make sure it was true and not just tabloid fodder. And you researched it, and it is true.
Oh, it is absolutely true. Also, before I read this, it's just clicking in my head now why he needs to emasculate other men so much.
Yep.
Okay, so how do we know that this is not just tabloid fodder? The Sacramento County District Attorney, Thien Ho, who tried the Golden State Killer, writes about his micropenis in his book, The People versus the Golden State Killer. In it, Ho describes needing to obtain circumstantial evidence to corroborate victim testimony about D'Angelo's micropenis. So all of the victims talked about it. It was one of the key features that they would mention is he had an incredibly, incredibly small penis. So what the district attorney Ho does is he directs the police photographer to take photos, this is once he's in custody, of D'Angelo's penis from multiple angles. District Attorney Ho says the photographer, sensitivity warning here, I'm going to say.
Yeah. Turn the volume down until the kids aren't in the car.
Definitely. The photographer got on his knees to snap D'Angelo's genitalia, but, quote, grew frustrated after several failed attempts. Ho says a detective, quote, threw up his hands in the air in exasperation and barked over the intercom, "There's nothing there." Ho says D'Angelo was directed to, quote, spread his legs and pull back the foreskin. And when the photog got the, quote, money shot, it proved just how small D'Angelo's manhood was. It was, quote, smaller than the circumference of a dime, and its length equal to the tip of your pinky.
Okay. I'm just going to sit there and percolate for a minute without commentary. That is exactly the sort of thing you look for in a power reassurance rapist. That would be the entire basis of his sexual inadequacy that he would try to overcompensate for by raping women. Now, serial rapists do evolve into killers, and there's a few reasons that can happen. The most obvious, and the one that he claims, is elimination of witnesses. If you kill them, there's no one to call the police. There's no one to testify against you. There's no one to give a really good description of you. So the most common motivation, and it really does fit here, is to avoid apprehension. And it works. It worked for him for 32 years because rape victims are often targeted in very isolated environments. Well, the offender realizes that murdering the victim is going to prevent them from reporting the crime to law enforcement or identifying them in a lineup.
Okay.
And if they live alone, it could be days or weeks before they're even found. All right, number 2, Colleen, in addition to elimination of witnesses, there's an escalation of violence and sadism. Now, in some cases, the perpetrator is driven by that need for power and control, sexual sadism, rather than the actual sex itself. In fact, we often find rapists who are unable, if you will, to sexually perform, unable to maintain an erection, to even reach a climax, but they sure don't stop trying and terrorizing their victim as they basically attempt over many hours sometimes, but never actually culminate. So over time, these offenders may require increasing stimuli, if you will, to achieve gratification. And that leads to lethal violence during the assault. But just keep in mind, with sadism, you do something, you like it. In other words, the more he tries and succeeds, the more he likes it. That's the sadism part. The more pain he causes, the more he likes it. And eventually, no matter what you do to cause somebody pain, you want to dream up something even worse. The thrill is gone, and that's how the escalation of violence continues. Number 3, Colleen. There's a hyperreactivity to resistance, and it gets even more severe the more you do the crimes. In other words, for a power control killer, which is what he is, and a power reassurance and a power reassertive rapist, you're hearing that word power over and over again, power must be maintained. Now, there is going to be increasing hubris, if you will. We talked about this. He is proud of himself after each one. He pontificates, if you will. He's very proud of what he's done. And that pontification will make him hypersensitive, even more hyperreactive if a victim resists. So if the victim physically resists and tries to fight back or attempts to escape, especially if they've been reading the papers and in their moment of terror, they're like, oh my God, this is the guy.
This is the guy.
This is the guy. I've got to fight for my life. I can't cooperate. This is the guy I've been reading about in the papers. If she or he starts fighting back, well, this is going to traumatize Golden State Killer's ego, not his body. Who are you to fight back? Do you know who I am? The offender may resort to lethal force out of pure anger or in a panic-induced loss of control. So it's possible that his victim started resisting more and he decided to teach them a lesson by killing them. Now, there's always, finally, good old-fashioned antisocial personality disorder. I am not a psychiatrist and I have not examined Ray D'Angelo, so I cannot diagnose him. But disclaimer is now in play. I would argue that this man is a full-blown psychopath. He has been testing the waters. And remember, you can start with just narcissism and then move on to different forms of APD, antisocial personality disorder. You can become that level, what we used to call sociopathic. And then you can go to the furthest end of the spectrum, which is psychopathy. For what he's doing, I would argue this man is a psychopath. And as I said before, he's blossoming because he likes it. It's not just the fantasy. He likes the mettle, if you will, mettle. He likes the pride he's feeling, the bravado, the machismo with each crime, especially if we take the signs of his manhood into consideration. He likes that he can do worse things with each new crime and feel nothing. The guilt is all abated. If there was panic at the beginning, he's smooth as silk now. He loves it. So D'Angelo, he displayed a really deep-seated lack of empathy that would approach psychopathy in my book, but also he had an inability to regulate his aggressive impulses, and he developed over time a complete disregard for human life.
You know what, Casey, just before we move on, as you were saying it, it just occurred to me, and the timeline fits when you were saying, how dare they fight back, that enraged him. And that's what sort of, led or helped contribute to the escalation into murder. And it just syncs up exactly with the advice women were given in the 70s. If they are to be sexually assaulted, to just lay back and let it happen. Don't fight back. And is there that logic that was informing that advice that was given to women?
I mean, listen, I'm going to just tell you because I've interviewed dozens of sexual assault victims. There is no one-size-fits-all piece of advice for what happens if you find yourself in that position. Okay. Unless, season 1, remember, Christine Sala, who escaped the rapist killer, Crendel Francois, because she saw he was a power control killer and she knew to just cooperate and give him his power back. And that is why she was raped but not killed. However, I'm going to tell you that statistically, women who fight back against their rapists are far more likely to be physically injured, beaten, punched, broken bones, but also more likely to escape being raped. Because for women who decide to fight back and risk themselves physically, this very often screws up the mojo of the power control rapist because it steals his power from him. And he might respond by beating you, lashing you, but it's going to shrink his willy in the meantime.
Well, and you're getting all of his DNA under your fingernails and all over your, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it always, this is your term, but it always stuck in my craw, that advice to women, don't fight back. To hell with you. And it's such advice, it feels like it's coming from a man.
Listen, for some, it's true, but for some women, that is how they will survive. That is how they will survive. And for other women, they might fight back and they might escape and they might fight back and be killed. So there, you cannot, I think you.
There is no best bad option.
It all depends on the time, the place, the perpetrator, and the victim. It's too many variables to give advice on that. All right, Colleen. So now we have the original Visalia. Ransacker, the burglary phase. And then he turns into the East Area rapist.
Up in
Night
Sacramento.
Stalker OG, second phase. Where are we going now? I mean, what have we learned from this so far?
Right. So he started as the Visalia ransacker. Then he's the East Area rapist up in Sacramento.
And he's blossoming and evolving the entire time.
Then he is the original Night Stalker down in Santa Barbara. Now, these are crimes that are happening all over the state of California. And as we said earlier, police were not initially connecting them because of the geographic distance. Right. But eventually they do. And when they connect the crimes, they see that common modus operandi between the East Area rapist and the original Night Stalker.
Okay.
So
they're beginning to connect the dots.
Exactly. They're connecting the dots.
With their fax machines.
Happening all over California in the 70s and 80s. But as we said, the lack of communication between departments made linking the perpetrator difficult. And it's not actually until 2001 that law enforcement finally links the crimes of the East Area rapist in Northern California and the original Night Stalker murders in Southern California.
Wait, 2001?
2001.
Started in 1974.
Took him that long to realize that they were connected. Wow. Now, mind you, Paul Holes will tell you in Michelle McNamara's book that there were plenty of law enforcement officers that had suspicions, but it wasn't officially linked until 2001. Mostly due to similarities in the modus operandi, as we said. Several rapes in the Contra Costa County believed to have been committed by the East Area rapist were in 2001 linked by DNA to Southern California murders.
And it all begins to fall into place with the puzzle. And by the way, can I just tell you, we did invite Paul Holes onto our podcast today. And he very kindly got back to me by email. I don't know when this episode will come out, but we're all going to be at CrimeCon in 2 weeks, and we hope you are there too. Paul is so busy preparing for CrimeCon. He said, I don't have the time today. And he's also preparing a very big special for his own podcast, which he can do, called Small Town Dicks. We'll give it, which is kind of a clever.
Oh, geez, for this episode.
Okay, hold on. It's a nickname for detectives.
Yep,
Stop now.
Yep.
All right. And he was like, how about after I do my own episode, Casey, on the Golden State Killers, since I was so involved in this. After that, we'll reconnect and I'd be happy to be a guest. So thank you, Paul Holes, for being willing. And we understand why you can't do it right now, but we're going to get you on in the future.
Absolutely. So, which I'm incredibly excited for.
Let me fan
you.
Okay.
Oh, hey. All right. No. But so we have here in 2001, we finally connect the East Area rapist with the original Night Stalker. For a while, the very clunky name of Earons is given. But it really was in 2013, Michelle McNamara, who renames the Earons killer as the Golden State Killer. To reflect the scope of the crimes across the entire Golden State of California.
Yeah. And she's the one who coined that name. And we want to, because the dots are being connected and the names are being shifted. But I mean, here's the bottom line. We finally had a name that just kind of encapsulated the breadth of his geographic
whole state
crime scenes from the top to the bottom of the state of California. But as far as we know, never outside of the state of California. And also, he's really killing now. So we don't want him to just be limited with being a sex offender or a rapist. I mean, he killed 13 people. So, hey, before we jump in and finish up what happens with the connections by law enforcement and then the connections of the DNA, let's take a really quick break, hear from our sponsor, Ventura Law. And when you come back, we're going to finish up and tell you how the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, was caught. True crime reminds us of something important. Real people's lives can change in an instant. An accident, an act of negligence, a decision that never should have happened. For more than 65 years, Ventura Law has represented people whose lives were altered by negligence and who needed someone in their corner when everything felt uncertain. After a serious injury, everything can feel overwhelming. You're trying to heal, protect your family, and figure out what comes next, all at the same time. Ventura Law helps the injured take back control, restore peace, and move forward. This isn't a big box law firm. When you call Ventura Law, you speak with real people who listen, guide you, and fight for you so that you can focus on healing. They represent victims of serious accidents, dangerous or defective products, and sexual abuse, including abuse during rideshare trips, cases where accountability and justice truly matter. Built on trust, teamwork, and compassion, Ventura Law has earned the confidence of the communities they serve for over 65 years, while giving back through charities, scholarships, and local programs. If you or someone you love has been injured and doesn't know where to turn, Ventura Law is here to help you recover and rebuild. Visit venturalaw.com or call 203-800-8000. Ventura Law, because how you're treated matters. Welcome back. So, by 2001, we know that the Northern California rapes and the Southern California murders are all connected. And we have this connection proved by DNA, but we still don't know who is responsible for them. Okay, why not? Well, finding the Golden State Killer is what Michelle McNamara essentially dedicates. I mean, the latter half of her career, it's really the rest of her life. Unfortunately, Michelle won't be around to celebrate the capture of DeAngelo that her research and her investigation propelled over the finish line. But the biggest contribution of Michelle McNamara's research was her push. And this is where Paul Holes comes in and so many other excellent experts. You can read about them all in the book. They push to connect those crimes, not just by MO, but by the DNA. And to do that, they really lean on familial DNA. And I know you know what this is because there's been so much on it in the last 10 years. But in December 2017, the officials that were led by Detective Paul Holes and the FBI lawyer, Steve Kramer, they uploaded the killer's DNA from a Ventura County rape kit into the personal genomic site GEDmatch. So GEDmatch and 23andMe, and just put a pin in that for 1 second, they are the only ancestry type sites that law enforcement, that when you sign everything away and you spit into the tube and you send it in, you should know that there is stuff in the small print there that does not protect you from having your DNA used to solve crimes, okay? Ancestry does not permit this. I think family tree DNA might allow it. Maybe 23. I think 23andMe doesn't any longer. They did, but then everybody was in an uproar, so they put the kibosh on that. But there still are these ancestry family DNA sites that you may want to get your DNA done and find out who you're related to. Do know that there are still many of them out there, and GEDmatch is one of them that will cooperate with law enforcement and use your DNA if it helps to solve a crime. So the website, GEDmatch, identified 10 to 20 people in their archive who had the same great-great-great grandparents as the Golden State Killer.
Fascinating. I just have to say fascinating.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Great. 10 to 20 people. And a team of 5 investigators working with the genealogist Barbara Ray Ventnor, who is an absolute goddess of DNA. She used this list to construct a very large family tree. And from this tree, they established 2 suspects who could fit the bill. Wow. One was ruled out by a relative's DNA test, but the other one was 72-year-old Joseph James D'Angelo. And because of his age and where he had been living at the times the crimes occurred, he became their main suspect. But they've got to get his DNA. So on April 18th, 2018, a DNA sample was surreptitiously collected from the door handle of D'Angelo's car. You put your hand on the handle of your car, you go into Walmart, they come by with a swab, and they've got your DNA. It's out there in the public. And another sample was actually collected from a tissue that was found in D'Angelo's curbside garbage can. So they had 2 different sources just to be double sure. Both of those DNA samples of Joseph D'Angelo matched the Golden State Killer crimes. So who is Joseph D'Angelo?
Wow. Okay. At first, it blows my mind so much that they were able to find the great common grab. Unbelievable. Okay.
You had your DNA done?
I have.
Okay. And I won't.
I have.
Reason.
No, I have. I mean, I did Ancestry, but yeah, I have had it done.
I'm just okay with my lovely Aunt Noreen telling me that I'm 75% Irish. That's all I need to know. All right. Tell me about Joseph D'Angelo.
Joseph James D'Angelo Jr. Was born on November 8th, 1945 in Bath, New York, to Kathleen K. Louise DeGroat and Joseph James D'Angelo Sr., who was, that military connection, a sergeant in the United States Army. On the surface, things may have seemed idyllic, but there was indeed history of abuse. In the 1940s, the D'Angelo family actually lived in New York State. They seemed like the typical American family, but his dad had served in the U.S. Army as a World War II gunner and a B-24 bomber. I mean,
Joseph was born in 1945, right? The year that World War II ends.
Yep, absolutely. So baby boomer. And his father did receive a service medal. He and his wife, Kathleen, had 4 children together, 2 daughters, Rebecca and Constance, and 2 sons, John and Joseph. Life wasn't easy for military families back then. The father was often stationed in faraway places. They lived on various military bases, including in West Germany during the 1950s. Also, Joseph Sr. suffered injuries while fighting in the war. I talk about this in my sociology class all the time.
We didn't even have the term PTSD.
We didn't even have it. We didn't. And actually, isn't that thread of traditional norms of masculinity so relevant to this particular case?
Yeah, you got to be in time and place. World War II was different.
Absolutely. So many World War II combat veterans came back with PTSD, but that was not a diagnosis. It was not taken seriously. So many men of that era were suffering with significant trauma and no one to talk to about it. It's possible that Joseph Sr. was emotionally scarred by his time in battle. As we said, most veterans did not seek treatment, nor was it available to them.
So what do?
They drink.
Yeah, and tamp it down.
They drink.
They didn't talk about
common,
it.
yes.
Yeah. They would just stuff down all of that trauma, but it's not gone.
Nope. Oh, gosh, I could tell so many stories.
So how does all that trauma and emotional upheaval, because you can stuff it down for a while, but it's going to come out.
Right, so you can numb it with the drink.
You can numb it and stuff it, but
it can present in violent outbursts and anger.
And did that happen?
Oftentimes towards children who...
And your wife.
And your
family behind closed doors.
Yep.
And it's, I think that domestic violence by military husbands was so common it became like a cultural norm. And not that it made it okay, but just so much happened behind closed doors that nobody thought was worth reporting.
So many people were failed, I feel like, because of this, because obviously there is no excuse to beat your wife and your children. But obviously what these men went through was so traumatizing, and they had no help. So
was there evidence that that's what Joseph Sr. did to his family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So according to members of the family, Joseph DeAngelo Sr. was an abusive husband and father. He would beat the kids and Kathleen. After one particularly violent incident in Germany, the military warned Joseph Sr. that he would be kicked out if he hit his wife again.
Okay. Then he really had to be abusive to get a military warning.
Absolutely.
All right.
His family was terrified of him.
And this is the family that Joseph Jr. grew up in. So there is one defining moment in Joseph's childhood history, and it's a sensitivity warning, because this is really awful. And by the way, it's not just a rumor, it's been corroborated. It's a very defining moment. You hear about children being imprinted by trauma. It's a clear imprint in his psyche. And it, to a very large extent, will explain, but certainly not excuse, how he turned out to be a serial rapist, but also a sadist, somebody who had deep, prurient fantasies that he wanted to act out. And as a child, Joseph witnessed the traumatic rape of his 9-year-old sister, Constance. So Joseph DeAngelo Sr.'s grandson, Jesse Ryland, told reporters of this grim incident that happened in Germany, not in the United States, but on the German base that went far beyond domestic violence and did not involve their father. So at the age of about 9, Joe Jr. was playing with his 7-year-old sister, Constance, in a warehouse. And one day, they were just playing. It was on the air base or the military base. One day, 2 airmen walked into that warehouse, and they raped 7-year-old Constance right in front of Joe and made him watch. And he was just 9 or 10 years old and unable to protect her. So this was likely profoundly traumatizing for them both. For Constance, obviously, but for her brother who witnessed it. And there was nothing Joe Jr. could do. It's even possible that at age 10, he was approaching puberty and not understanding what was going on. His body may have reacted and he may have been aroused by what he was watching. We don't really know. But when they went and told their parents what happened, the parents didn't take it seriously at all. They just were instructed to never speak of it. Do not tell anybody about what happened. Well, probably because the people who raped Constance were other American military. It was happening in Germany, but there's no indication it was anything other than American military servicemen. So after suffering the violence at the hands of her husband for so many years, Kathleen doesn't really know what to do to process her pain. So she turns it on her children, and this happens a lot. When the wife becomes a punching bag and has no way to process what's happening to her, her violent outbursts will then not go against her tormentor, but go against the defenseless children. So Kathleen starts to hit her own children, especially Constance, the rape victim. And again, Joe is powerless to protect her, Constance, himself, or his other 2 siblings from their own mother.
All right, moving ahead and back in the United States, between 1959 and 1960, DeAngelo attended Mills Junior High in Rancho Cordova. That's going to become important because a lot of his attacks happened in Rancho Cordova, California, near Sacramento. And beginning in 1961, he attended Folsom High School, where he played on the school's junior varsity baseball team. According to prosecutors, DeAngelo committed burglaries, mail theft, and torture. And where's one of the trifecta? And killed animals during his teenage years. In 1964, here's our answer, Casey. He joined the U.S. Navy. He was a serviceman and served for 22 months in Vietnam.
And a Vietnam veteran.
Yep. After his honorable discharge, he attended college at Sacramento State University, graduating in 1971. And here is the kicker. In 1973, he becomes a police officer in the burglary unit of the police department in Exeter County near Visalia.
So I don't even need to explain to you the connection between him being a cop in the burglary unit and then becoming a burglar. It's like next generation, next step up from being, he just doesn't become the good guy with the burglary investigations. He becomes the burglar. I mean, this is kind of like, the volunteer firefighters who set fires so that they can put them out, right? There's all kinds of twisted psyche wrapped up in it.
After a stint in the military, Joseph DeAngelo got his degree in criminal justice and joined the Men and Women in Blue.
He moves to Exeter and becomes a police officer for 3 years.
There was a huge increase in burglaries, and the department was really struggling to find the culprit.
He was very proud whenever he wore a uniform.
DeAngelo was kept busy on patrol, but on off hours, he had a seemingly traditional home life as a family man.
Joe DeAngelo and Sharon got married in 1973.
We call her Sherry. They were happy together.
Joe's childhood friend Judy Schneider and her parents were Joe's very special guests at the wedding.
When you look at the wedding picture, you can see the pride in Joe's face. You can see the pride in my parents' face.
And the strong bond DeAngelo shared with Judy and her family grew as Joe became a father.
They'd come out here to the house all the time and visit Mom and Dad, bring the babies, and they were very proud parents. His wife was in law school at the time. My sister and I, would go out and babysit because then we found out, Joe was helping putting her through school. He worked nights. Joe would be fixing dinner or paying bills, shopping. He was doing all that so that she could have the time to go to school and not be disturbed with other stuff.
The women he was attracted to were very strong women, very outgoing. This is not a man who surrounded himself with meek women.
And in 1976, Mr. DeAngelo relocates to another Sacramento area police agency, the Auburn Police Department.
When he's in Auburn, he begins not only as a patrolman, but he is at the bottom of the rung. And he is sent out to take a report of a broken manhole cover or barking dogs. This is the lowest of the low policing, but he never takes initiative to try to rise above that. He remains on patrol.
I talked with Chief Nick Willick. I initially called him up and I asked him if he remembered a Joe DeAngelo. He goes, oh yeah, I was his sergeant. Joe DeAngelo was not a very good law enforcement officer.
He was not really popular among the officers. They did sense something in him that did not seem to allow him to fit in to the ranks.
He liked the trappings of being a police officer. He liked the power, the control, wearing a gun.
You think that you're safe because your husband is in bed alone with you? You think he can protect you? So here's the rub. This is unbelievable. When the burglary reports would come in his own jurisdiction, he would assist in the search for himself as the Visalia ransacker. I mean, talk about the ultimate contraindicator. It can't be me. I'm the cop handling the complaint. So in July of 1979, which would have been in about the middle years of his killing and raping spree, he was arrested for shoplifting. And of all things, at a hardware store, he was shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. Now, the dog repellent, I guess, in case a dog attacks him, he didn't own a dog. And he received a 6-month probation sentence. But of course, the police have to fire him. They can't have a cop arrested for shoplifting, and they don't want to look the other way. And rumor has it they were looking for an excuse to fire him. He had all kinds of performance problems as a police officer. I think that the weirdness, the creep factor about him was evident to even them, but they couldn't put their finger on it. And so when he was arrested for shoplifting, they were like, you're done. I mean, you can't have your cops being criminals, at least once you're made aware of it. And here's yet another twist. During this time period, when he was doing all these burglaries and the ransackings and the rapes, he was married the entire time. In fact, in 1973, he married Sharon Marie Huddle of Citrus Heights in a ceremony that was held in Auburn, California. And they go on in the 1980s to have 3 children together, all girls. Now, I don't have the years that they were born, and I want to ensure that they have their privacy. We don't want to be tracking them down. It's not our business. But they were all born in the early to mid 80s. And it was in the 1980 that they purchased this house in Citrus Heights where he would raise his family. And also the very same house he would be arrested decades later. Once he settled down in 1980 and started having children, he didn't move, he didn't leave. And after his arrest in July of 2018, I'm sure you will not be shocked to find out that his wife, Huddle, filed for divorce. But neither his wife nor his children suspected him of these crimes the entire time. And I would think that almost all of, well, not all of them. He had kids in the early 80s, so while they were babies, newborns, and toddlers, he was still killing until 1986. But I think that once the kids get to a certain point, it's not going to be that easy for him to make excuses and get away from his wife. His eldest daughter really described him as the perfect father, which might be surprising, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had a fractured identity, a totally different personality when he was at home with his wife and kids, and then a completely different monstrous personality when he was committing his crimes. And perhaps he was a perfect dad when he was at home, because don't forget, at the time when his children are 3, 4 years old, able to be old enough to develop memories of him, of being that perfect father. 1986, he stopped killing his rampage completely. D'Angelo's last rape and murder victim that we know of happened in 1986 in Irvine, California. A realtor, this kind of kills me because I practice real estate as well, and I've walked into some houses and you never know what you're going to find. A realtor was visiting a home for a buyer and discovered a woman's body in one of the bedrooms. The victim was 18-year-old Janelle Cruz, and it was a really gruesome murder. Talk about escalation. This one was unfathomable. There was blood everywhere. 3 of her teeth had been knocked out of her skull. 2 of them were found in her hair. Another one was in her lung because she aspirated it after it was knocked out of its socket. The killer had used a blunt object to forcefully bash in her head. It turned out a pipe wrench was missing from the house, and this suggested that the killer had used the pipe wrench as his weapon. The marks on her body suggested that she had been tied up, and yes, she was raped before she died. Now, that killer took all of the ties, the ligatures, the murder weapon, the pipe wrench with him. Investigators have a number of initial leads, but one by one, all the suspects were eventually eliminated until, don't forget, it's 1986. I mean, well, wait a minute. We don't want to fast forward quite to the day he gets arrested, and we want to talk about this.
Well, I mean, my big question, Casey, is how does he just stop? I mean, he's for 12 years, he's escalating, and then he just stops. Is that normal?
No. Okay. Because you're going to hear serial killers can't stop. They can't stop. They can, and they do. In fact, you know, we have so many unsolved homicides in the United States that are probably the work of serial killers who stopped. And because they stopped, we can't follow the pattern or link them together.
And not stopped because they're in jail. They just that is self-control. I don't understand.
So that is the number one reason that they do stop, right? Is because they either die or they're incarcerated.
Yeah, not him.
Okay, but no, we saw BTK stopped for 14 years. Jeffrey Dahmer stopped for 4 years. They're not all these impulsive Jekyll Hydes who can't control themselves. Some of them, in fact, the ones that are the most controlling, sometimes are able to control themselves if they have an incentive to do so. As long as they're getting away with it and confident that they can get away with it, they're not going to stop. But then life circumstances might change. I'm going to walk you through the reasons I think D'Angelo was able to stop right now. In 1986, this is the year that, as far as we know, he had the last murder of Janelle Cruz, and it was a doozy. It was violent. It was bloody. It was perhaps one of the, I think it was the very worst one, just in terms of the blood, the gore, and the suffering. But 1986 was actually a huge hallmark year, if you will, a milestone in DNA technology. I was hearing about it because I was doing my doctorate at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in 1986. So I was following the news, and you would say, well, I don't remember, the average human is like, but I don't read those news reports. But you know who might? A former police officer.
Okay.
So people who followed true crime and forensic technology, people in the biz, as we say, in criminal justice, they would know it was in all the papers. Huge articles were written about this incredible breakthrough. 1986 was the year we were hearing about DNA in the criminal justice system because it became a real-world tool to solve crimes. It was the first year that DNA evidence was introduced in a court of law, happened to be in Britain, but we followed what they were doing. The technology is good on both sides of the pond. And in the UK, they got a conviction. DNA evidence was introduced in court. It upheld the test for scientific validity. And the British police solved the murder of 2 teenagers using DNA. We were all reading about this. DNA is the future. Forget about eyewitness testimony. We're going to solve all of our crimes with DNA. I think Joseph DeAngelo was paying attention, and I think he took it seriously. And I think he's thinking back to the last 12 years of how much DNA he has left at crime scenes, and he knows that if he keeps doing it, he's going to be caught. So suddenly everybody knows what DNA is. And it's being used to catch murderers, and it's a wholly vetted scientific evidence that's going to hold up in court. Now, again, you don't need to worry about witnesses anymore, but for him, there's no way for him to avoid what's happened in the past, but he can limit the possibility of him being apprehended by stopping right then and not putting any more DNA at any crime scenes. Because based on what we were hearing, you can get it from blood, saliva, semen. It's almost impossible to do a crime without leaving DNA.
Yeah.
So this is, of course, think of him as a man, assuming he's a psychopath. He was also very intelligent and as a man who constantly sought control over others. I mean, the changes that were happening, the thought of getting caught in 1986 became real. I don't think he ever believed he would get caught. But then when he read about DNA, I thought he's like, I got to get control of myself.
Not so arrogant anymore.
I think that really punctured his balloon of arrogance. So can people stop? Yes, it's rare, but it happens. Number 2, he had children. Okay, I know you're going to say, Casey, wait, if he's a psychopath, he probably doesn't care about his children. You would be surprised. There's different kinds of psychopaths, right? And they're not all criminals. We have industrial psychopaths. They make great CEOs of very capitalistic corporations. But the birth of his 3 girls in the early and mid 80s, I think it changed him. Remember, if he had a fractured identity, there was the part of him that he presented to the outward world, not the man in the ski mask, that passed for normal because nobody ever thought it was him. And I think he decided to leave the monster behind and lean into the identity, if you will, collapse his fractured identity into one identity and embrace the one that was a husband and a dad. I think he loved his daughters. The part of him, okay, it's not the same as split personality disorder, but okay, you've got these adorable kids. And at the same time, your wife is like, whatever you've been doing out there at night that you don't really want to tell me about, that shit ends now. And I think, if you will, she's like, you need to babysit. I need to work. You need to do your 50%. You need to wash dishes. You need to be here. And you're not going out with the guys and playing poker on weekends or whatever it is you're saying you're doing. And maybe she even suspected he was having affairs when he would go away overnight. Mm-hmm. You can only make so many excuses about fishing trips with the guys or poker games with the guys. A new mother raising 3 young children, she's not putting up with it. Her bullshit meter is going to be on high alert, and she wants him at home. I think actually having children, the family life, it interfered with his crime. Now, in theory, you're going to step back and go, well, if he really wanted to kill, he could have just leave his wife, divorce his wife, abandon his children. But remember, this is happening at the same time the DNA technology is out. So he's thinking, well, yeah, I could keep killing. I could just ditch my wife, but I might get caught anyway. So there were numbers of reasons. I often wonder if when he looked into his daughter's face, I wouldn't be surprised if right about the time his oldest daughter neared the age of 7, which was the age of his sister Constance, when she was raped, we find that this can be very triggering and you get flashbacks. And I know you're going to say a psychopath can't have empathy, but something may have switched in him, a flip of a switch. In the face of his own daughter, he could not imagine putting a human being through the agony that Constance had, and now he sees his daughter as a potential victim of someone like him. That is a long shot, but it happens all the time that people see something in the face of their children that's triggering for them, and they change. Maybe all of the suppressed trauma from seeing his sister raped when he was 10 years old finally surfaced, and he developed the empathy because the beautiful face of his 7-year-old daughter may have triggered it. I think when he had his daughters, he was unable to imagine anyone doing the harm to them that he had done to other women, and it made him want to stop. So finally, I'm just going to put it out there. Colleen, I don't have any proof of this.
This is the one I think is the most persuasive, though.
Okay. I think that a lot of his rape was stemming from that deep sexual insecurity because of his micropenis.
100%.
And because maybe it just wasn't the look on his daughter's faces. He's in his 40s now, all right? And something happens in the 40s. Now, two things. He has children now. He has proof of his sexual prowess. Look, I've procreated. You know I can get it up. You know I've had sex with my wife. You know I am a manly man because I have 3 children. All right. He's got proof that he can sexually perform in his children, right? I know that seems really facile, really simple, oversimplified. But for him, I think it might have been significant. I am a man. I have children. I'm a father. Macho man.
Provider.
I'm a provider.
I'm
a breadwinner.
Yeah.
Okay. And those girls were evidence that he could sexually perform. He doesn't have anything to prove anymore. And of course, he's in his 40s. And I don't think I need to tell you, you've learned this from commercials for Viagra. Men in their 40s, many men start experiencing erectile dysfunction around this time. Now that certainly, as I said, will not stop certain rapists from trying to rape just because they cannot get or maintain an erection. But in this particular case, maybe this is the trifecta that shuts him down. Having children, DNA, and losing his testosterone all at the same time. To put it simply, maybe he just decided to quit trying to prove himself and just accept that his criminal career was over. Now, again, it is extremely rare that serial killers desist on their own without being caught, but we have seen it happen. We solve cold cases all the time where they've stopped and we catch them later in life. But cases very often can go cold because we're still looking to link these cases together, and they have gone off into the sunset and managed to desist. It does happen.
So what I'm also getting out of that, though, then is, and we did talk about it, if the real driving crime motivation for him is the rape, and really the murders were to cover up the evidence of the rape, then I'm persuaded by that.
Yeah,
actually, that argument. Okay, so you just pointed out, over time, forensic DNA technology made significant advancements.
Leaps and bounds.
Yep. One significant new tool was the establishment of DNA databases. Labs would submit unidentified DNA samples from crime scenes to the database in hopes of finding perpetrators or connections between crimes.
So in 1996, which was 10 years after Janelle's murder, the Orange County criminalists were shocked to see Janelle's killer's DNA from the semen recovered at the scene from Janelle. That evidence, that DNA inside Janelle, matched 3 other murders in the county. And the MOs matched too. Took 10 years. But again, we had all these DNA developments at the time, and CODIS was established.
Yeah.
So Keith and Patty Harrington, they're young medical students and a nurse couple. I love that.
I know.
And they were bludgeoned to death in their home in 1980. Patty had been sexually assaulted. 6 months later, Manuela Withun, she was a loan officer, she was also raped and murdered in her home, and they're beginning to triangulate them, connecting the dots. Eventually, using the DNA plus the matching MO, the modus operandi analysis, investigators are able to connect 10 murders that occurred in Southern California during the 1980s. There were 4 couples and 2 women. They had discovered a serial killer almost 2 decades after these attacks. They had never been able to connect them until the DNA. And that, again, is why they started calling him, retrospectively, the original Night Stalker. He's in jail now.
So let's stop talking about him.
You know, I will say, though, the last thing I'm going to tell you is that I did a lot of coverage on this. By the way, I did a long series called Very Scary People on CNN and HLN. You can still see, I believe, on Max. You can watch it. And we did, I think, a 3-hour series that I did my commentary on the Night Stalker. And the final frame of that, because we don't want to spend any time on him, but if you look at pictures of him when he was going into court, which I think was at the very beginning of the pandemic, right? He had his face mask on. He's in a wheelchair. He looks decrepit. He literally aged overnight from 2018 to 2020. It's like an entirely different man. Now that can happen. The trauma, I mean, the shock of being caught, the agony, the psychological warfare of the entire world being against you, your wife leaving you, your daughter's hating you, whatever it is, can age somebody profoundly overnight. But of all things, they kept saying he's too ill. He's just too ill to go to prison. Yeah.
Tough.
Poor baby.
Yeah.
He's not fit to stand trial. He's there. He's in his wheelchair, like curled up.
They always are. They get caught and, oh, come on. Harvey Weinstein, by the way, all of a sudden.
Don't name him today.
Ugh.
Okay, here we go. And I just want you to know that we think that was malingering, that we see this all the time, that on the day of justice, they all get sick. They all physically crumble. They're all too weak to go to court. And I think this man performed his entire life, and he performed at his sentencing. But he did spare us a trial, and maybe it was about his family, sparing his family. He pleaded guilty. And he's an old man, so you know he'll never see the light of day. Pleaded guilty to basically all the charges that were negotiated.
Don't give them that. It wasn't for his family. He's a weak man. That's what he is.
I'll take that.
You know who wasn't weak?
The people who stood up to him.
Yep.
The people who fought back. The people who saved their own lives, perhaps by cooperating, which is their judgment to do if they want to. We want to really honor the victims.
I felt empowered, finally. We now have the control. We now have the power, you son of a gun. And I wanted him to know that.
50 rapes that we know of. 13 murders that we know of. And that's staggering. I don't want to say that they don't deserve it, but it's probably too much for us to go through all of the names here. So we're going to wrap it up with a victim impact statement from one of his many victims.
So I'm reading the victim impact statement by Phyllis Henneman. She was raped on June 18th, 1976 in Sacramento County. And in her statement, she says, on June 17th, 1976, I went to bed not knowing that in just a few hours, my life as I knew it would change. I was a normal woman of 22, happy and carefree. The devil incarnate broke into my home, blindfolded me, tied me up, threatened my life with a knife, and raped me. In 1976, women were treated more like suspects than victims when it came to rape. My sense of importance in this world diminished with this treatment. When I found out that the devil had been captured, I felt relieved. But his capture brought about a rush of memories of the rape, wondering what he did with the things he stole from me. What would happen next? The roles have now reversed. His victims and their families are now free, and his freedom of 40 plus years is now revoked. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
The strength.
To his weakness, there's that strength.
So at this same time, we need to remember Michelle McNamara.
Yes.
In addition to all of his victims. She's the pioneering American true crime journalist and writer. If you haven't read her book, you will by July.
Book club.
Book club. And she was very famous for creating the blog called True Crime Diary. She will, however, in addition to True Crime Diary, be forever best known for her obsessive investigation of that elusive serial offender, the Golden State Killer, and that name is the name she gave to him. So on April 21st, 2016, 2 years before we would capture Joseph DeAngelo, Michelle McNamara died unexpectedly in her sleep in her home in Los Angeles. She was only 46 years old. An autopsy determined her death was an accidental overdose caused by a dangerous combination of prescription drugs, including Adderall, Xanax, and the painkiller fentanyl. Please sit up and pay attention. Please don't use fentanyl without the supervision of a doctor. This compounded a serious but undiagnosed heart condition that she didn't even know she had. Her severe insomnia and intense stress from her relentless investigation of the Golden State Killer definitely contributed to her medication usage and overusage. So in many ways, she was a victim, an indirect victim of the Golden State Killer. Now, because McNamara was just 2/3 of the way through her book when she died, her husband, who's the comedian Patton Oswalt, and her colleagues, they stepped up, and they finished that manuscript. And that book, published posthumously, is I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It is the massive bestseller. It turned into an HBO documentary series, and her exhaustive research and the widespread public attention that brought this cold case to a close, it's really widely credited for helping those investigators finally catch and arrest the Golden State Killer. She wasn't around to see him have the handcuffs slapped on his wrists and carried out and go to court. But I really believe she's up there watching, smiling. She knows. And we thank her for all of her hard work. We want to acknowledge Michelle's incredible impact on this case while honoring all of the victims and survivors of this horrific serial killer and rapist. And for those of you still out there, we honor you. We commend you for your strength. And boy, do we wish you peace and healing. Oh, for Joseph DeAngelo, you can run, buddy. You can even quit killing, but you can't hide and you can't get away with it because crime doesn't know what time it is and justice doesn't care. At Ventura Law, they've spent more than 65 years standing up for people whose lives were thrown off track through no fault of their own. A serious accident or injury isn't just a legal issue, it's personal. It affects your health, your family, your livelihood, and your future. Ventura Law helps injured people navigate that aftermath and begin the journey back to their lives. This isn't a big box law firm where you're treated like a case number. When you call Ventura Law, you speak with real people who truly care. They listen, they stand with you, and they fight for you, so you can focus on healing and get your life back. They represent victims harmed by negligence, including serious accidents, dangerous or defective products, and sexual abuse cases, including abuse during rideshare trips, when accountability truly matters. Built on trust, teamwork, and compassion, Ventura Law has earned that trust for over 65 years while giving back to the communities they serve. If you or someone you love has been injured and doesn't know where to turn, Ventura Law is here to help you recover, rebuild, and move forward. Visit venturalaw.com or call them at 203-800-8000. Ventura Law, because how you're treated matters. Thanks for listening. This has been a Parish House production. Special thanks to the fabulous team at Uptime Productions.